amazing episode of Security Happy Hour. I am your host, as always, the Cyber Warrior. And you know you are right here live on Cyber Warrior Studios. Now, we all know Security Happy Hour, you come for the beer or your favorite beverage of choice, and you stay for the conversation. And I promise, we have an amazing conversation planned for you today. And I can't explain how excited I am for this because I just realized I've been connected to my guests on LinkedIn since 2017. Just figured that shit out today. So we're going to get back into it here in just a second. And we're back. Like I said, it wasn't going to be that long. We have 10 seconds. That's all it ever really is. But hey, anyways, there it is, the official kickoff of Security Happy Hour. We are live. We are here. And with me, I have this week the one and only Ryan Renee Rosado. That's a lot of R's. Holy crap. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm well. Yeah, if you say my initials, either sound like a seal or a pirate. But I'm well, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And crazy world the LinkedIn world can be, that we have somehow been connected since 2017, and yet here we are really talking for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, we talked back then, and like I said, network is important. When me and you had first started talking back in 2017, I was just retiring from the Army in June. Well, yeah, I want to say it was June I got out. I think June 21st may have been my official last date, but I was already back home by then. And, you were talking about Booz Allen and a bunch of other things you were doing at that time and how people helped you. And you were willing to help me out. Granted, I never worked for Booz Allen, and I refuse to ever work for the government. That's just me. But, it was very important to me because it showed that there are people out there willing to help others and put their name on the line for those that are trying to make a difference. So I very much appreciated that at the time. And it's crazy that I just realized 5 years later that you were one of the people that attempted to help me.
Well, I have sent many of those messages. I've also been the recipient of those messages, and they are very helpful. And so glad that I could try to be helpful. Funny fact, I actually was only at Booz Allen for about another month, and I had received another offer that I ended up taking and starting in July. So is what it is. But here we are.
Yeah, definitely. So why don't you get us started? Because, one of the biggest things about this show and about what I do is it's a free-form conversation, free-flowing. Everything is kind of, we shoot from the hip around here. But the biggest part of it is how you got into cybersecurity, because everybody's journey and everybody's path is different. And with that, it allows people to see that it doesn't matter where you come from. You can still break in. You just have to have the drive and perseverance. So why don't you give people kind of a rundown on where you come from and how you got into cyber?
So the short story is I got in through the Air Force. I was an intelligence analyst, and I was assigned to a defensive cyber mission and then an offensive cyber mission. So really interesting stuff. And then I went into, it's not actually even on my LinkedIn resume or profile anymore, but I went to Booz Allen for a short minute. And similar to you, I quickly realized I did not want to be in government consulting. Nothing against it. I realized I was more interested in the corporate cybersecurity world, and I had quickly found a way into it. And so I was at Ernst & Young for quite a few years. And I feel like that really gave me the foundation I have of cybersecurity, because there I started with cyber intelligence, but then I was able to do incident response. I was able to do some work with their cyber center, and start to understand what an MSSP is, start to do work with compliance, and GDPR was starting to be a big thing around the time, right? Just all sorts of facets, and really understand what is this machine that is cyber, which I think is going to be really important, right? When we'll come back to when we talk about the cyber data gap, because it's not just one thing. And I think so many people think cyber is like this one cookie cutter size career. And I think that's why us in cyber know it's so important to talk about our journeys, because almost nobody has the same exact path as somebody else, even if you start in the same place, right? So from Ernst & Young, I've continued consulting with a few companies. And if I'm being really honest, I'm currently unemployed or fun employed I was unfortunately impacted by the layoffs this year, but that's okay because the comeback will be better than the setback. So
Most definitely. And it's crazy because you see a lot of these layoffs from, and there's so many reasons behind it. I've heard theories and stories and things like that. You look at a huge security companies like Rapid7 laid off a bunch of people. You look at a lot of these other corporations that basically laid off almost half of their IT and security staff. Like it's happening as we speak. And, I look at that and I'm like, these are the same organizations that were bitching about there not being enough cyber talent in the workforce. Now you're laying off half of your staff, and next year or within the next 6 months, you're going to be bitching that there's not enough cyber talent in the workforce.
What's interesting, and I can only speak from my experience too, is that some of the roles right now at companies I'm seeing that I've personally experienced is, if you're laying off or you're not getting the approval to hire 4 or 5 people that you need, some of these companies are creating these like impossible roles where you need to have a developer skill, you need to have a specific market, or industry skill, and you need to have like 10 specific cyber skills. And yet, so it's like a snake eating its tail, in my opinion, right now. And it's really upsetting because there are still a lot of opportunities that are actually open. And there are obviously a lot of great candidates that are more than ever super available, right? So it's definitely a hard time, I think, for our industry. And I know that's not just specific to us, but I think because of the cyber gap we already have, it's only going to make it worse.
Yes.
And right, it's a roller coaster. It's very steep, where right, the increase in the need, and then the floodgates open up, and everyone's going to get hired, and then it's like, we just saw this in the pandemic, right? A lot of cyber professionals, obviously, as well as other industries and other, completely different professions were impacted as well. But it's really frustrating that there's not a little bit more just groundedness or being able to like weather the storm, because at the end of the day, the key thing is the need for cyber has not waned. If anything, we've seen where the need for cyber is greater than ever. So when you're laying people off and then you're giving your team that you're keeping more work, you're introducing actually a lot more risk for mistakes. And I mean, honest mistakes, but when you're being overworked and you're doing the work of what should be 3, 4, 5 other people, like that is not a formula for success.
Yeah, definitely. And to me, the biggest thing is not only that, but they're not paying them more either, right? So they're laying all these people off. They're not paying their people more, and they're burning them out because now they have all this extra workload and there's not extra time. And so you're losing time with family and friends and personal stuff and just so much else. And when you're looking at some of these places that are a 24/7 shop and you've laid off half the workforce, and so now they're picking up their slack on top of, an added thing here or there, it's really they're gonna be like, what, I'm done. I'm out of cyber. I'm gonna go find something for like 30 grand less to just actually be happy with my life versus working this job that it may pay more, but I hate my life. I don't want to do it anymore.
I actually know people that's happened to that are more so from a cyber leadership level. And it's frustrating to see because as someone who's genuinely in love and passionate about what we do and what we get to do in cyber, right? To me, this is not just a paycheck, but of course I would like to be compensated fairly. That said, it's frustrating to watch great minds that really could solve some of the biggest problems we have choose to not, because it's being able to be on the forefront and choose those, solve those problems means that it does come with all, and it's not that we're not hard workers. It's not that they're not, wanting to put the effort in. It's just that it's like they want to, give a foot or give an inch, and yet the world is requiring them to do a mile. And it's one thing if it's, for a season or it's for, a specific, time frame, but when it's 24/7 like that, that's just insane. And what's really sad when we talk about the cyber gap is, at least again, in my experience and what I've been reading, everything from, what the White House is going to be supporting down to just all these different initiatives. It's so focused, hyper focused on getting more people in that it's not focused on their attention. And that to me is short-sighted. But there's a whole other problem that, in my opinion, I've personally been researching and trying to figure out and understand why is this not more of a focus. And I'm curious, if you don't mind, I'll put you on the spot. Do you know how many people even are in cybersecurity?
Rough numbers, no. I would say at most, maybe 10,000 at most.
Really? It's interesting. Okay, we're gonna play for a minute really quick. My next question to you and to our industry too, and everyone who's talking about the cyber gap is, so who's a cyber person? Like, where's the line in the sand? Do you include your salespeople that are selling cyber services and products? Do you include your adjunct professors that are teaching cybersecurity? And do you include lawyers that are involved maybe in any kind of investigations, or as we know with the new SEC guidelines? Like, I'm just curious. So who are we including? Because, and I've been pretty public about this.
I'm gonna touch on that. So finish your question, but I know where you're going.
It's not a question, but I'm just saying, one thing that has bothered me for a few years is SANS every year, and not saying anything bad about SANS, but this is, to me, is not their best moment. Every year around January, they come out with like the 20, we'll call it sexiest jobs in cybersecurity. And it's the CISO, the pen tester, maybe the reverse malware engineer. And I am not hating on those jobs. They're amazing. I wish I could do more of those types of skills. But I can tell you right now that unless you have someone actively selling those services or buying those services, none of those people get to do what they're doing unless they're in the bad part where you're an actual hacker and you're out for your own selfish motivation. And so it's really frustrating to not see, I think, all the professions that we have, let's say, or all the career paths be appreciated. And then when we say we have a cyber gap, I want to know, well, where? Is it the salespeople? Is it the SOC analysts? Is it the CISOs? Like, where is that divide? Because obviously I know where I'm seeing the divide, but I don't see the cyber gap getting talked about or researched or written about in that detail. And I apologize if you hear in the background my dog just
you're good.
touching the squeakiest toy, so I apologize.
You're good. No, I love how you bring that up, because here's how I look at things, right? And this is why I've done this show. I've had salespeople on, I've had marketers on, I've had content creators on, analysts, hackers, pen testers, whatever. Had them all on because they all fit the mold. I will not consider somebody who sells cybersecurity tools but doesn't know the tool or cybersecurity or the terminology as being a cybersecurity person. But
how do we count that when we actually count? Oh, and by the way, so according to the ICS Squared, as of their 2002 workforce study, there are 4.7 million cybersecurity professionals around the world, and roughly 20% of that is in the United States. And
short there.
You came up really short. I think there's more people that go to RSA than 10,000. So I was a little.
Well, no. The reason I say that is because that is how it's perceived, right? When you think about it, because there's such a shortage. All right, now let's look at this. There's 7 billion people in the world.
Yeah.
Doctors, lawyers, whatever, teachers, everything. Cybersecurity. You're looking at a workforce.
Yep.
At most companies, not all, because some do it semi-right. 2 people plus a CISO.
So, when you do the math, 4.7 obviously is not even like 1% of the population. But of course, it doesn't necessarily need to be. What's interesting to me is just, first of all, I think that's like the only number I've been able to find that is actively counting us. So I can't even tell you if it is definitely accurate. It's just the only one that's even starting to scratch the surface.
I think it's based on their certification count, which then if you've got people with dual certifications within ISC Squared, so you're looking at some of their newer ones especially, is where they're pulling that number from. That would be my guesstimate.
I haven't been able to figure out where they're pulling their numbers from, but I can tell you that when I've done the research and taken a little bit of a different direction, so these is 4.7 million people that are cybersecurity. In my experience, and similar to what you just said previously, you'll have a company that will have a director of IT or, someone involved in technology and infrastructure, and they're all of a sudden given the responsibility of cybersecurity for their company. So is that person counted? Because there's about 55 million when you count technology people across the world. 55 million is a lot more than 4.7, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to imagine, obviously, that, like, just to your point about even the certifications or the training or the responsibility, that there's going to be crossover. And then there's also going to be some crossover with, especially like as cloud systems and just other types of some engineering are coming up, but they're not specifically cyber. You know, they might be software engineering, and some of them might be having to secure an app or a system or a server, but they're not really a security person, right? And so that's where my questions are, because I think that if we really wanted to solve the cyber gap, we need to do it in a very methodical way, and we need to figure out who we are first, or how many we are. And I don't feel like we can ever really match or measure our progress if we don't know our baseline. And that is like the core component of anything in cybersecurity.
That's like trying to find a deviation in like user behavior without having a baseline first of how that user behaves. You can't do it.
You can't do it. And so I'm kind of surprised that, one, the cyber gap, every conversation is always about, let's just enhance education. Like the White House, I'm not upset with them at all, and I'm not going to get political. But again, to just focus on the kindergarten or college or technical, whatever, it's that's not going to fix it overnight, and the gap will continue to grow. So we need something that's a lot quicker.
I don't think the gap is what they say it is.
I don't think it. Well, here's the other part too. So they just look at, from what I understand, a lot of these job boards, and they'll say, oh, there's X amount of jobs under cybersecurity that are open. I can tell you firsthand, without going into too many details, but I've seen companies put up all these roles, and they don't actually need those roles. They might need a different role. They might need a similar role. As I said before, some companies are doing the opposite. They're putting up one role when they should be putting up 5. And I know that this is, probably never going to happen, but there's part of me that's like, can someone validate that company actually needs the role they think they need? Because I'm telling you, there are some companies out there that, and I'm not sure who's putting the need out there, if it's even coming from someone who understands IT or cyber, but they're putting a need out there for, sometimes it's usually a hyper technical role. And I'm like, they don't either have the maturity or the technology that they need. They think they need someone with this caliber of cybersecurity to come in and actually secure. So there's a lot of issues, and I just feel like everyone's running with, oh, we have a huge cyber gap. I'm not disputing that, especially right now.
I will dispute that.
You don't think there's any cyber gap?
I'm not going to say there's not any. I'm saying it's not as large as they think it is. Here's part of the problem.
That's what I'm trying to say. I think we agree. Yeah.
Here's the problem is twofold. One, to your point, they're putting out all these jobs. It's like 5 roles in one, So essentially, what is happening is we're seeing 2 things. We're seeing senior roles put out like senior positions with a junior title, because they only want to pay so much money, because they know cybersecurity people are smart enough to be like, no, homie, pay me more.
Yeah.
But at the same time, these junior people that are junior, technically, looking at it going, you need 3 to 5 years experience for a junior role. Doesn't make sense. I can't even apply because I don't even fit the experience level, let alone all the certifications you're asking for. That's part one.
Right.
Part two is this. I've actually had calls with recruiters. Recruiters have called me prior to me getting several of the jobs that I've had back when I first got out of the Army. And they were like, hey, do you have, have the GX certification? Which one? It just says GX certification.
Yeah.
Which one? I'm like, GX is a certifying authority. SANS is the teaching. It's a SANS certification. And there's about, 15, 20 of them, if not more. It could be up to 50 now. Whatever. Which one? Oh, it just says GX certification.
Yep. No, I think actually our industry is getting better about that, because I think that either there were quite a few mishires where someone like has the right cyber skills. They're not, I'm not saying that they don't know what they're doing, but they weren't, the skills weren't aligned to the actual need. And that's what I'm talking about, validating. And that's where I think HRs have to get more involved to understand who and what they're actually hiring or putting in front of, their.
And a junior role needs to be for a junior position. 0 to 1 year experience max. 0 to 1.
I don't think there's too many of those. And so, I mean, that's going to be, I think, hard. because to your point, yeah, I mean, I have had people since I've been laid off come to me and say, do you want this role? And I'll read it. And also they're like, oh, well, because it's a junior role, of course it's going to pay less. Cause like, that's how they justify it. And I'm like, listen, I have the skills I have. Like, you don't get to try to get all the extra things I know at a discount just because you don't technically need it right now. And then try to, nickel and dime me on salary, which is obviously it's an important piece.
It is, but that's why you have to find the companies that are going to work for you.
Right.
There are certain people I will never work for. I will never work for Google. I will never work for Facebook or Meta or whatever you want to call it. I'll never work for any of the large organizations. 2 reasons. One reason is because they get way too political and it becomes ideological and all the other BS. The other one is because they pay based on where you live, not based on what they can afford. I know this because I talked to Google. Google came to Pittsburgh. I was at B-Sides Pittsburgh. I went there. They said, hey, you can actually work security remotely now. I said, bet. I said, pay me California salary. They said no.
Right.
I said, so you're going to pay someone in California $300,000 a year if you hire them there, but you're only going to pay me maybe $110,000. No, I won't work for you. They said, but you live in Pittsburgh. No. It's not based on where I live. It's based on what you as an organization can afford. You can't afford me, homie.
Well, I will say this. I have seen some great, especially through consulting, great organizations that happen to be really large. And, the teams are, and some of them have been clients of mine. They're just absolutely incredible. No company's perfect, but at least when it comes to culture and the things that matter as far as respect or pay, they seem to be right in the right. But I've also seen horrible companies that are huge and just awful to employees. I've also seen the opposite. I've seen some startups be some of the, it just kind of, I think that comes down to the leaders and the managers, right, of who you'd be working with. I've also seen it in various size companies where like one team or department is amazing. And then the culture of another department or team is horrible.
Yes.
Because it really is. It can have, all you need is one bad manager. And that's actually something similar, but different within the cyber gap and just within our industry that I think is a problem is too many people. And I respect people who are like, I enjoy doing the forensics or, SOC work. I don't want to be responsible for someone else's career. This isn't the military. Not everybody should have to, I think, be forced if that's either not something they're going to enjoy or not something they're good at or not something they're ready for. But there are people who are either really ready for that or have been trained to develop people. So, but
which is why they should have, and actually when I worked for Presidio, we had talked about this, me and my boss at the time. And actually, I think even when I worked for Trace 3 under Ryan Benson, me and him had talked about it also. At the C level, you should have a technical person, not a business-ready, business-oriented leader, manager, an actual technical person that still was hands-on keyboard, whether in learning or whatever realm, to speak to the technical aspect. That is why, because then people would stay hands-on all through their career.
But I've unfortunately seen it. What I was trying to say is I'm seeing people who are super technical engineers or super technical incident responders, et cetera. And then they're nice people. They're not going to kill you in your sleep. They probably pay their taxes. They love their children and their wives and husbands, et cetera. And they're nice people. They're the worst managers. And and the problem is it's not just hurting them, because now they're basically kind of being forced to do something that they don't want to do. But it's hurting the people that are coming up under them. And I think that for some reason, which I can't understand, people are just, I've seen people get promoted because, they've been here a long time and they're just ready for the next step, or they're really excelling in their, career doing what they're doing now. But then they just get promoted and there's no, you understand this from the military. There's like no NCOA academy. There's no, management leadership essentials.
Even those are garbage. Let's be honest. Hey, this is how you do an NCOER, or this is how you do this, not how you actually lead people, which is lead from.
And I'm not disagreeing with that, because I have, between the military and then doing a plethora of leadership and management. So I always tell people, like, it's one thing to be a bad manager, but like I've heard people say like things about management, and I'm like, guys, there's management and then there's leadership, and you need to understand the difference if you're going to be in any kind of position that's remotely management and leadership, right? Because Oh, don't get me started on that. But it's just frustrating because, good leaders, a lot of people will call themselves or call other people leaders. And it's like, wait, let's go back and figure out, well, what are we saying is a leader, right? And what are we saying is a manager? And I think also the other piece of it in our industry is trying to diversify it. Like you have to be, what I probably was actually the biggest struggle for me to understand was managing people who are so different than me. I mean, it sounds easy on paper, but when
It's hard.
It's hard, especially when they have different motivations or they're not as motivated at all, right? But that's a core component. You can't just manage and lead people who are like you or want to be you.
Which is why I wanted to get into leadership. Funny enough, I
well,
fought
it's
it
funny you say
for
that.
the longest time, but it was why I pulled the trigger, and how I ended up where I'm at is because I found I love motivating other people to do better, whether or not
yes.
whatever their motivating factors are. I don't give a damn. We'll use that to make you do better. If it's money, fine.
That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Right.
I'll pay you more eventually.
Right.
But
so it's funny that you say that because I'm very similar, but I have run into a lot of people. Not only are they not interested at all in developing anyone else's career, they're also very stagnant. They're like, listen, if I could just do what I'm doing and make a lot of money and not grow at all, then I'm happy. And for me, that's like, oh my gosh, it gives me it's like a cat scratching a blackboard because it's not me. I want to be a CISO. I want to be a CEO. Like I want to continue to lead and grow people. I want to be responsible and try to make the world better and work with people. I will admit, growing up and kind of through different, ways of young adulthood, like we're talking really early 20s, I really wanted to lead things. And I thought that meant I wanted to finally have a say and I wanted it to be my say. And then when I got into leadership, I started to understand the value of collaboration. I mean, I might ultimately be responsible, but I want stakeholder buy-in or teammate buy-in. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's my way or the highway. I didn't really understand that growing up because what kid does necessarily. But it was just kind of ironic when I finally started to be able to say, oh, I can lead this however I want. I was like, oh, I don't want it however I want. I want however it'll be best for the group or the masses or the whole, audience, let's say. And I found that the best way to do that is through transparency and collaboration. I may have at the end of the day the final vote on something, and that's, depending on the situation, that can be very hard. But ironically, I would rather hear what everyone else has to say and try to find a consensus and conform to what, and also meet the goal than just my way or the highway, even if I think I know what's best based on whatever it is. And that's also hard. I want to make sure I can call that out because as a woman, I can tell you that I have been told my confidence comes across as snobby or and then I've also been told, so I'm very big into if we work together, regardless of what our rank or positions are, if there's a problem of any kind, usually much smaller, and I'm bringing a problem to your attention, I'm also going to bring a solution. But in the past, more recent past, I have been told that when I brought a solution, I came off my way, the highway. And I was like, no one who actually knows me would ever believe that. But I'm like, is it because I'm I'm not going to be the quiet, woman in the back who's just going to take notes. If I'm working, you're paying me. I've also say that there's 3 types of jobs in the world, especially in cyber. Those that pay you to think, those that pay you to do, and those that pay you to think and do. And for me, I'm going to be in that last bracket.
I'm not gonna lie. I love that. I will always be in that last bracket. Well, I'm more leadership now, so I try to lead and motivate and all those other things. But if somebody says you come off as it's my way or the highway for coming with a solution, that is the whole premise, because there is bitching and complaining, or there is actually bringing a problem and solution. Like, hey, this is the problem. This is what I think would solve it. What do you think? And the fact that somebody would come at you and say, oh, it's my way or the highway.
What's ironic, I can understand that. I remember saying we had a problem. It was on a consulting gig. And I said, we need to fix this so it doesn't it doesn't actually turn into a problem with the client, right? Trying to get ahead of it. And I said, but we can't just ignore the problem. And it was actually a few teams internally that were not communicating well. And I was like, okay, something's not jiving. Like we need to fix this. Here's the solution, how we fix this, but we can't ignore this like lack of communication. Otherwise we're all going to fall on our faces.
Right.
So I can understand where I was assertive, but I was not wrong.
But you should have been assertive, because if there's a lack of, I face this problem all the time with clients in IT and cyber. Cyber is like, we need to do this, but they don't talk to IT and the directors or the managers, the CISO and the CIO. They don't talk. They're always at odds. And you're just like, homie, I just need you to understand that this is this and this is that. Let's talk and work this out. And they're like, no, I don't want to talk to you. Talk to the hand, because the face don't want to hear it. And you're just like, I quit.
But I will just say that I'm really starting to see in a whole new way and understand what it really means to be a woman in this industry. And part of the cyber gap needs to, so there's a lot of people who are like, I have nothing against women, and good, you shouldn't. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you are free and totally like, pass go collect $200 and continue with your life. Because I think if we're not necessarily helping different minority groups, and especially women in our industry, then I feel like if you're not actively helping, then you're not really a part of the solution. And I find that there's a whole gamble of issues when it comes to women in security. And again, when we talk about the data gap or the cyber gap, we talk about people coming into it. And there's all this, we should, we should be letting women know they can come into our industry, which I find kind of funny, because I'm like, I don't know if you saw one of my posts a few weeks ago, but women actually were the main bulk, especially of programmers and security, in the 60s. So I'm like, we need to stop and figure out how that changed and why we lost them in the first place. So we don't do it again.
So I got a question for you, right?
Sure.
Because this comes up all the time. Oh, we need more women. We need more women. And I've seen on so many of my posts, so many things that I do, because you may not have seen, or you may have gone through and looked at the playlist. I don't give a damn who you are. Come on the show, show your face, show you belong. This is who you are. When people talk about needing more women or whatever underrepresented group in cybersecurity or in IT, do you feel, because here's my problem, I feel like it's a person's choice whether or not they want to get into something. It is your individual choice whether or not you enjoy and have a passion or a drive or whatever to get into a certain field. Do you feel that somebody is telling you, oh no, don't go do that?
So
because
yes,
there is harassment. Let's be honest. There is the men's club, the boys club, and everything else like that. That is there. But from a woman's perspective, do you feel that it is the women pulling themselves out and saying, that's not a field for me, I'm going to go do this?
You are pulling. So you opened a can of worms. So I'm going to say a few things. One, I want to be clear. I love men. I have no problems with working with men. They're not the problem. No. Unless, and it is in my experience, I was told for the majority of my so far almost 12-year career that I could not be in cyber because I'm a woman. Yeah, you have to acknowledge it may be.
I will acknowledge that people say that. It pisses me off, but I will acknowledge it.
And so at some point, and I will tell you, because I've considered getting out, not so much in the more recent years, but especially in the earlier ones, it was like, why am I doing this? Why don't I just go into something else? I'm sure I could find something else that I'm good at and would enjoy just as much, if not more. And it was more like, why am I dealing with the drama? Why am I putting myself through it? And of course, especially in the beginning when, you're starting out in the first few years, it's like, well, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not that great. And it took a while for me to really be like, wait a minute. No one's actually ever complained about the products I'm producing or the reports I'm writing or what I'm doing. They just keep telling me what I say now, actually, from continuing to be observant of how people have interacted with me in different, in my career in different capacities. And I know I look young, but I have found that people usually question not what I say, but who's saying it. And it's more like, well, how does she know that? If you and I were to say the same thing.
I've seen that. I've heard that in the past about being in in front of like a board or directors or whatever.
Like, how does she know that?
Clients. I've heard that.
And for me, that is a key piece that we need to acknowledge before we can even try to fix it, because I don't feel it's getting acknowledged enough. And then the other problem I see is like, I have gone to a few events where it's either a woman speaking about women in cyber or a panel of women. And what I find difficult is sometimes they give advice and I feel like they are in a way presenting it like as if they were voted by all women in security to almost be like our ambassador and speak on our behalf. And what we need to realize, just like there's not one collective male, there's not one collective female or one collective
whatever
disabled or you know, like I'm also Puerto Rican and I'm very proud, you know, Latinas in cyber and right. So there's not one, because that's a whole different also can of worms where I've also been told, oh, you're Puerto Rican, you don't look it. I thought that was your last name from like marriage. These are really things people have said to me. So I can only also imagine what's not actually being said to my face at times. And I don't care as much because I don't get caught up in the details, but these things matter in the sense that I'll be honest, like I remember like, it was like I got like struck by lightning when I realized I could actually do cybersecurity and be in cyber. And I'm not kidding. It was when I was getting out of the Air Force because I was debating on after being told in the military that I could not do cybersecurity, not only because I was a woman, but because apparently I was an extrovert. Apparently that does not fit.
Hold up. They told you, tell me it wasn't airmen that told you this shit.
No, it wasn't. It was like from the first day I got to my tech school, I had tech sergeants who were like, you're in the wrong career field. And I had no idea what they were talking about. I was like, what are you talking about? And then I continued to be told that throughout the entire time I was in the Air Force, not by everybody. And I don't want to like talk bad about the military, but we do need to acknowledge there were some bad apples that were, let's say, the last piece of the little boys club. And they had a lot to do with why I got out. And when I got out, right around the time I sent you that message, and I was trying to be helpful because I had other people that were helpful. I remember being like, because I remember I was like, well, the skill I have from the last 4 years is cyber, but I'm not sure I want to stay in cyber. So what does that mean? Does that mean I restart? And I remember literally I was driving and I was like, how do I interview and tell people that I don't, because I was actually pursuing a different degree. And I was like, how can I technically try to go for a cyber job, basically just to pay the bills at the time, right? And figure out like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I was like 23. And be like, well, this is my skill. This is what I have. Like, I need to get employed because I'm deciding to get out. But I'm not even sure that this is what I want. And then I was like, no, this is what I want, but how am I going to make it work? And then I was like, I'm getting a degree actually in emergency management. And everyone kept asking if I wanted to work for FEMA. And I was like, no, actually at the time, again, 23, being in the Air Force of all of 4 years, I was like, I actually wanted to get my degree in emergency management because I was like, one day there's going to be something like a cyber attack on the electric grid. And then like hospitals are going to have trouble with like patients on life support. And everyone told me I was crazy. And then
I've been saying that shit for years.
I'm not happy to be right, but we know that things like this are starting to happen and have happened in different countries and in different ways.
Even here, the hospitals have been brought down to a standstill because of ransomware. Even in the
actually
US.
People have died. And then not that I'm happy at all to say that, but we need to acknowledge. So there was an infant who, because the computer systems at a hospital were down, I think it was in Tennessee, they weren't able to, listen to like the fetal heartbeat or do imaging or such. And so they had this woman give birth the old school way and basically didn't realize that I think the umbilical cord was like wrapped around something totally preventable had all the technology been. And those things, like I have goosebumps. It makes me really sad, right? But we need to acknowledge, right? So anyway, the point is I remember getting my degree in emergency management and being like, I need to get into cyber. And of course, at the time was getting an interview with Booz Allen and then Ernst & Young. And I remember, actually, this is the really crazy part. I was like, wait a minute, I don't want to give up my emergency management degree, which, by the way, actually, because it's management, I had a lot of leadership courses, by the way, which I'm very thankful for. I decided to pursue another bachelor's. And then everyone also decided to give me their opinion. And they're like, why are you doing that? You don't need to do that. You should just give up one or whatever. And I remember I finally got to a point, and this is definitely where my assertiveness has definitely come from, where I'm like, I didn't ask you people. I didn't ask.
I did not ask for your opinion.
And it's funny because now, at least sometimes when I've given my opinion, I'll be like, do you want to know my unsolicited opinion?
Right. Do you
But
want to know
also-
what I think, or do you want me to make you happy? Those are
But
the two
also-
options you have.
I'm finally at a point in my career about the last 2 years where I've seen some of the decisions I've made that people were like, no, you can't do that, or you can't do cyber as a woman, or you can't go for 2 degrees. Or I've even had people, I was just a few courses short of my bachelor's in cybersecurity, and someone's like, you don't even need a degree anymore because like you have so much experience. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to finish what I started. I'm a life learner, a real life learner. Like if I could stop time and also get like 10 other degrees in various things up to like, I was interested in cyber law, so becoming a lawyer.
I would love to be there.
But I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you something, and maybe this means something to somebody. I thought really like hard and like a few years ago, like, do I want to go to law school and be a cyber lawyer? Especially knowing like everything that's been going on, you know, knowing that we're going to need more laws and stuff around it. And I can tell you for me, and just for me, for the people who are cyber lawyers, like I applaud you. I thank you. I've worked with some of them.
Do they exist though to the extent that they understand both sides?
Well,
they may know laws and interpret the laws as such in a cyber
some of them,
sense.
yes and no. It's like what you said about salespeople. But for me, the defining factor, the reason unless like major changes and let the world changes. So I no longer come up with like major 5-year plans because I want to give myself room for opportunity in case something else comes along. But I realize I don't want to be in a courtroom. No interest. I'd much rather be in a SOC. I'd much rather be in, talking to the CISO or working on strategies or with the real ones and zeros. I don't want to be in a courtroom, and I don't want to be like writing about what happened. I actually want to be doing what's happening, whether it's, preventing or reacting. And so for me, that was like the defining line. I totally would love to go and still learn.
I don't want to have to go get a license. I don't want to have to go through and do all the bullshit that's required to be an official lawyer in the US.
Well, that's okay, because again, also when we talk about the cyber, gap, I think we've established like we want to enjoy our lives. We have our career. We want our work-life balance to some degree. And so we don't want to be, filling 5 roles unless you want to do that and you're getting paid for them, but to each their own. And so anyway, that's a lot, but that had a lot to do with like my career where, yes. So people have told me I couldn't do things. People have told me like, I actually was told not that I could not do cyber because I'm a woman and because I'm an extroverted woman. And I'm constantly still told like, I'm so odd that I'm as technical as I am, but I'm not an introvert. I don't know what to do with that. But I also am told like, people ask me why my parents named me Ryan. So there's something more to say about humanity.
Look, hey, hold up, time out. Look, on a personal basis, yes, not from a professional or like it's weird standpoint, just out of curiosity, yeah, someone like myself would probably ask that in conversation. Like if we're hanging out and I'm like,
yeah,
where did the like non-binary name Ryan come from? Because literally if it's anybody, I know men and women named Ryan. Yeah. I would literally be curious where that name came from.
But that's more acceptable.
But it's more of like family history. Like, does it mean something to the family, or was it just spur of the moment, kind of like, you know what, fuck it, she's a Ryan, we're going with it. Like that would be me though.
But there's a difference, is what I'm trying to say. There's a difference between asking that question and there's a difference between someone giving me their opinion. Like, why would your parents give you that name? That was not a great idea. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I don't know if there's like a sign on my forehead that I can't see where people just feel the need or feel that they can just tell me these things. Cause I'm like, these are very odd things that people tell me. At the same time, it works when it comes to clients, because they also tell me things that are usually really good to know. But no, people.
The best is doing it when they don't know you're a woman. Because
I'm sorry?
You just do it through an email when they don't know you're a woman yet. And just get whatever you want from them.
Well, I do. You have heard that like the same resume with a woman's name and a man's name, like they usually always pick the man. And so I am curious if that I have no way of knowing that. But I have been curious about that. But
I wish I could do that, but I can't. But I can give you some people that will send the exact same email and see what answers they get.
I get to it's. That's a different conversation. I get frustrated when I check in a hotel and they're like, "Oh, sweetie, you can't check in without your husband or your father." And I'm like, that's
just like going to a car shop, and the woman gets charged more than the man because they assume the man knows more. look, let's be honest. I don't know shit about cars. I can change my brakes, my tires, my rotors, and I could change the oil. I choose not to.
Yeah.
But other than that, the car is a car. Like, if it looks pretty, I'm like, all right, cool. It's big enough for me to drive.
It's funny you
Like-
say that, because that's another example. A few years ago, I had a Sentra, and I decided to replace the struts and the shocks all by myself. And
See,
I had
couldn't do that.
every guy not only told me I can't do it, that I was going to hurt myself or hurt the car. And when I thought about it from a risk lens, I thought, well, one, my car's paid off, and worst case scenario, I just buy a new vehicle, which I'm ready to do. But if I can get a few more, a year or two out of this one, great. But anyway, so I also thought, well, if I buy the parts and if it doesn't work out well, I get free towing. So then I can't get ripped off on parts. And then I thought, even less of a risk, maybe I get 2 of like the struts great or shocks, and then the other 2 not great, not the end of the world. Still, like, and it wasn't just about the money. I genuinely wanted to see if I could. I joke that I had dated a mechanic or 2, so I should have been able to figure this out by now. And my best friend, which is another story, he was working at Tesla as a mechanical engineer, which is by far my number 1 success story. If you ever want to hear that, I just did his resume and he got hired, and it changed his life. And to me, that is something I'm more proud about than most things I've ever been able to be involved in.
Awesome.
But I knew the risks and I understood what I had to do. And I looked at the YouTube videos and I was like, I could do this. I'd way rather buy the tools and figure it out. And don't get me wrong, I actually had one small issue where the brake line would not line up when I was trying to reassemble and put like the tire and everything back on. And I called my friend, I FaceTimed him, and I said, Rob, what do I do? And he's like, oh, just go on the other side of the car and lift the whole front of it and it should balance out. And I said, okay, cool. Like, I would have never figured that out, on my own necessarily. Right. So thanks. And I kid you not, it was done well. And the way I know that is because I then had free alignments and I took my car back to the shop and I said, I know you said I needed to replace them. I did. What do you think? And they were like, who did this? And I said, me. And it was great.
See, I look at it in like, since I left the military, I don't have access to a lift. So I cannot do anything besides brakes and rotors, because if I need to lift the front end up or the back end up, that takes jacking up both tires, putting the jack stand under it, doing all that stuff. I don't do that. I don't have enough. I don't have the patience for it. So fuck it. I'm gonna do one tire at a time, change the brakes and rotors, and be done with it. And that's the extent of the work I do on my car. So in that regard, this whole male-female dynamic in men and women, or whatever the case may be, I do not ever understand, because there are people in all walks of life, in all aspects, that can do whatever job. You put your mind to something, you can fucking do it. It is your choice. And this is my issue, though. This is always going to be my issue. When you limit yourself based on how you look, you put those limits on yourself because you have decided, you chose to listen to the naysayers. Yeah. You chose to listen to those people that have said you can't do it. You are not able to. I can give a list, a slew of probably thousands of people that have chosen to not listen to them and go on and become great. So when you choose not to listen to the naysayers, you can do great things.
Well, I think the key piece is you should not be surrounding yourself with the naysayers, right? And that's where you need to, as an individual, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all responsible for our career. You need to be responsible for who you surround yourself with. And if you are surrounded by naysayers, it's just data, and what you do with it, that's where the value comes from. And so for me, yes, there were times when it was harder than others. And there are times now I kind of laugh about it. But the other piece for me was, especially 10 years ago, I didn't have a strong female role model at all times in cyber.
But do you think, so me personally, I've never really had a role model. Let's be honest. I grew up, my parents were married. I had my dad and my mom. Let's not get it twisted. But my dad and my mom, we were broke. We were poor. We grew up in the lower middle class. Like, nobody really had the money to do anything for me. I didn't have anybody that said, oh, yeah, this is what you're going to aspire to. It was just me looking at it going, you know what? I'm going to be better than what I have. I'm going to have a family better than what I had, better than what I had growing up, which was my parents taking out loans that they couldn't afford, them doing all these things that they really couldn't do. They just wanted us to make us think they could do it. And then as you get older, you're like, how'd you do that? Oh, well, we took loans out on life insurance and da-da-da-da-da. And so when I look at these things, I'm like, I never really had a role model that was like making money, or like someone I looked up to is, I want to be that person. What I looked at was, I came from lower middle class and was like, my kids ain't ever going to have to worry. When I grow up, I'm going to make something of myself. I'm going to do something that no one in my life is ever going to have to worry if I have to provide for them. So why is it that we need someone that looks like us to say we could do something?
I understand that. And actually,
do you get where I'm coming from on that point?
I do. And we come from very similar backgrounds. But at the same time, I do think that there's power in just knowing that it's possible when you're, and for me, again, I have no issues with men or any,
right. No. I'm not saying you do. I completely get where you're coming from.
As long as you're not telling women they can't, that's what it matters. I'm not trying to, that's the thing. If a person, man or woman, wants to come into cyber, I just hope that they have that ability, because telling people they can't is not helping anybody. And I think that unfortunately that's still happening, and I don't know why.
I haven't figured that shit out either. Because
I don't need to figure it out.
I've met women that blow me out of the fucking water that I'm just like,
But that's it. So what's important about, I think what's important to see women in leadership, especially in our profession, is because there are going to be some key differences sometimes to women versus men, and women. So like, I'll give you an example.
They're different. I've talked about this.
They are.
And they're completely different.
And I think it's important to see. So I'll give you an example, right? So something I learned in a leadership academy, it was talking about like kind of like the root cause of why there can be differences in men and women. And this was not cyber specific. Actually, fun fact, I was the only cyber person in that leadership academy, which was really interesting for me. That said, it talked about the word teamwork and how there was like this study done, and you and I, if we were in an interview, we might say that teamwork was super important. But what does that mean? How do you define it? And at least this one study that, granted, was a little bit dated from the 80s, showed that men, more so from the Boy Scouts, said that teamwork meant supporting each other, especially publicly. So if you and I are working together internally, no clients, and we have our group and we're presenting like whatever our idea is, let's say I see something that could be better. Women see teamwork as supporting each other as well, but being more open about it. And so when you mix them, there have been issues. And then the other ones, like the women aren't team players or the men aren't team players. They say that if you're the man presenting and I'm like, oh, Derek, let's say the slide has a word that's not spelled right. Hey, I'm not saying, hey, you're an idiot, you don't know how to spell. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, hey, I don't want you to go looking like a fool when you go present this to your client. Right. But what they found in the study was that men would feel like, oh my God, who is she to call me out in front of my peers, and not on the side in private and say, oh, by the way, there's a spelling mistake. And so I think that we need to really understand and again, I don't even think this is gender anymore. It could be millennials, it could be boomers, it could be different, countries, it could be different ethnicities. When, let's say if you and I are both like, we value trust, it'd be like, well, what does that mean to you? Right? We need to start defining what these.
I think we do, but I think one of the biggest things has been, and this has been one of the bit. I'm horrible at this. When it comes to my own kids, when it comes to other kids, different story. When it comes to my own kids, I'm horrible at this. You praise in public, you discipline in private. If I were to be, and I sit there, and my son plays football, I watch his football coach. He yells and screams and everything. My son now, mind you, he's going into third grade. So he plays on the third grade team. He gets yelled at. All the other kids yelled at. Equal opportunity ass chewings for everybody. Everybody. You screw up, you're getting yelled at. I'm very much about that. But at the same time, when it comes to as adults, you do not yell, punish, whatever in public. That is a private thing of, look, because of now, if you do it in public as an adult, you're always the screw up. You're always the asshole. You messed up for everybody.
But there's a difference. I'm not talking about yelling or punching or yelling,
But
right?
but no,
And I
but
would hope
this comes
adults aren't
down
even
to
yell.
even when you try to correct someone, and again, I'm trying to. I don't think it's men and women, but to your point of what I'm trying to get at, if you want to correct somebody on a presentation, on a spelling error, on whatever the case may be in the corporate environment, you do that in a private setting. Because
I do think that there are, but my point wasn't necessarily about the correcting people. It was just the difference in how two different groups might define the word that we thought was so universal, such as teamwork, right? I mean,
teamwork makes the dream work, but what is teamwork?
Different people how defining that differently, right? And so whether like in the past with managers I've had, I'll ask them like, what are their core values, and if they say like trust, I'll be like, well, what does that mean, right? Does that mean that like like I think making sure we are all on the same page really means asking those kinds of questions. And what I'm also trying to say when it comes to women in the workforce is, understanding that they may have a different answer, but that it's not wrong, and that we just all need to be on the same page.
I got two questions for you, Ryan. Okay. 2 questions, because my boy SRNAR brought them up, so I am going to bring them up to the table before we get into final words, because it is 7:56. We're almost at the top of the hour. But before I do that, I want your opinion on one thing, then we'll get into these questions. Nature versus nurture. Do you feel, in your opinion, this is your opinion, not a professional belongs in the workforce type of statement, but do you feel, in your opinion, the majority, not all, not everybody, not exclusively, the majority of women utilize nurture and emotions to lead and be like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. They're more empathetic, they're more understanding, versus nature, which more logical, more homie, you should have got this shit done. You were told, you know what I mean? That type of understanding. Do you think that is a key difference in leadership between the two? And this is why I feel sometimes I think women make better leaders. Sometimes, not always. But because some of these nature and nurture can collaborate and work together internally and be logical and emotional. But do you feel sometimes one side or the other takes full control? And that's for both men and women. But do you feel women tend to react more emotionally with the nurture side?
I will say this. I don't think it matters nature versus nurture. I think at the end of the day, we need to be open to the differences. And I do know so I'm going to throw a little bit at you, which when you think more of like the Myers-Briggs, I know for me, I've always come up as the logical, objective one.
Do you really?
Yep. I also come up as the extrovert.
I'm proud of that. I'm a logical person myself. I love it.
But I also, that doesn't mean I'm heartless and I can't empathize.
No, it doesn't.
And it doesn't mean that but it also doesn't mean that someone, man or woman, who's thinking and has more emotion or empathy in their decision-making is wrong. And I actually would say that depending on the decision, like for example, the layoff, you need someone who's probably logical, and you probably need someone who's going to be empathetic to figure out the best way to find a solution. Like I would want both people at the table, whether, to figure out what's best for the business or to figure out like what's best for the employees. And so, but what I wanted to do is, so I'm going to throw this one thing out to you. And if anyone's into books, it's the book I'm about to finish. It's called Invisible Women. It's about how there's all these, it's called Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. And so there are actually, it's not just nature that makes women different. There's a lot of things that make women different from a nurture perspective, right? So like, for example, women, like I experienced this, and the book also, I actually find it really interesting how it goes into more detail. I was told at a young age, at like maybe second grade, which is like maybe 7, 8, that I wasn't doing great in math and science. I was always told, well, you're a woman or you're a girl. Girls are always better in history and English. They're not good in math and science. I have news for you. Fast forward like 20 years, I knew friends, mostly men, that had taken something called discrete math. And it was the one course I had left.
I hated that class.
I had friends that took it and barely passed, and they were like people I thought were absolute geniuses. I had other friends who were like, I changed my entire major to avoid that class. So me having struggled with math in my life, and actually it's funny because before that, even though I'd had to put some extra time in, I got an A in my other like math, college algebra stuff and whatnot. And so here I'm going into discrete math. And I realized looking back, I had all these biases in my head that, oh my God, I am going to fail. This is the hardest math class possible. And math is my hardest, biggest challenge. And I'm
it really?
It's not, I'm not saying I'm not good in it. It's just the thing I have to make sure I take the time in. It doesn't always come as naturally.
I get you. Yeah.
I also found out later in life I have number dyslexia, so I'll do something kind
Hold
of
up.
dumb.
I've never heard of that.
That is
I've heard of dyslexia, not number.
I am not kidding. I will see something. It might say 216 plus 1, and I think it says 261 plus 1. And I have to be hyper focused, and even then,
only
like,
numbers.
Yeah.
That's a new one on me. I believe it.
Anyway, that said, I took discrete math, thinking I was barely like going to pass and basically fail it. And I actually got a B plus, and I could not be prouder of that because again, awesome. I knew everyone I knew that was like what I thought, all these men that were smarter than me at the time that had taken a few years before me, they were like, I barely got past with like a C. I barely got through with like a D. And I'm like, I am doomed. And so
I thought I was going to fail.
Realize that is not a nature thing. Women are not bad at math. We're just believing the lies we're told. We're just believing, and there's little things too, like in textbooks and in kids, most scientists or STEM things always have a man. And it's when you have a picture of a woman scientist, I'm not saying take out the picture of the man, but if you have both, they say girls start to believe that they can become scientists at least 30% more. Just because
I think everything should include both these days. Or at least two different or whatever, because it should be both.
You asked me the power of representation and seeing it. And that's where it's important because it's not a nature thing. Women, again, and girls are not bad at math, but we're almost nurtured into a way that people now believe women must be bad at math and it's a nature, it's a brain thing.
Well, those are stereotypes and things like that. My thing comes down to career fields and Ryan. So damn it, AR is going to kill me because I'm not going to get to these questions. We're already at 8:02. But my thing comes down to career fields. If you want something, if you say, I'm going to work in cybersecurity or I'm going to work in IT or I'm going to be a neurosurgeon or I'm going to be a lawyer or I'm going to be whatever, why wait for somebody else to be the first? If you think nobody else out there looks like you, nobody else out there can do it, and you're like, oh, I can't do this because no one looks like me, that becomes my issue, is when when the only reason you're going to go for that job is because somebody else looks like you, that's when I have an issue. I don't disagree.
I'm not saying that though. I'm not saying
I know you're not. I'm just saying that is where my issue lies.
It can be, well, and it's not just helpful for me. It's helpful for the people who are going to be hiring me if they're like, oh, okay, we've seen women see.
I get what you're saying.
Because completely. I'm right, and I'm happy to carry the weight and do things, and I think I'm thankful that for everyone who's in our industry, man or woman who've the first CISO who, broke in with that and come a long way. And I think our profession is really obviously maturing and changing and evolving and is amazing. And it's because people are becoming the first person to do the SEC guidance, the first person to become.
When are we, but at some point that's going to run out and you just have to believe in yourself.
Oh, that you can't. I don't think you can. You have to believe in yourself in anything you do. I mean, whether there's
going to be adversity no matter what you do.
Absolutely, and we shouldn't try to. There's going to be a challenge and adversity, and I'm not saying we should make it easy peasy. I'm just saying we should take out this part because cyber's hard enough. Yeah, no, you need to have, just like anything else, determination. And you need to stick in it because, especially like if you're getting called to do an incident and it's Sunday and you had amazing plans or it's someone's birthday or whatever, like that's when you really need to make sure that you like this thing.
And I've seen men and women who crumble under the know your shit. Like if you're doing IR, know your shit. What is what? Or if you're going to talk to a client and you're doing some type of deployment or whatever, if you can't speak to that client confidently If you don't have the confidence, I don't care if you've never done it before. Sound like you did. Sound like you know your shit, because you know you're going to have to go research it. You know you're going to have to look it up.
But keep learning.
Be confident and be like, yeah, I've done this shit before. Yeah, I got you, homie. We're good.
I would caveat that with I would caveat that with no one, I think, knows everything all the time, because we
you don't.
Evolving, but you do need to know a level of the basics. But yes, there are things that, like AI. I didn't know. I didn't hear about AI like maybe 5 years ago. I barely had gotten my head around blockchain, but I did go and do the research, and I did intentionally challenge myself. And I promise you, when I intentionally actually when I went to get my cyber degree, every beginning of every class, I was like, why am I doing this to myself? And then I was like, okay, I know why, because if I didn't want to do my college degree, nobody would have known. Nobody, again, was necessarily enforcing it. It probably sounded nice and looked good on my resume, but I got hired on a ton of jobs, obviously, without it. And I even had a manager who was like, you probably don't even need it anymore. And I was like, but I'm going to go get it. And now I'm looking at my master's, not because I'm told I want to, or not because I'm told I need it.
I refuse to go back to school.
But that's you, and that's fine. I could totally.
And again, it's a personal opinion and how we look at things. And this is what everybody needs to understand. So, Ryan, before we go, because I'm going to give my last minute spiel. And I know, AR, you can yell at me later because we were served together and I love you. But we didn't get to your questions. It's okay. Ryan, before we go, any advice you have for anybody breaking into this industry? Because I know that is the biggest point of the show. That is what I want other people to understand, that everybody has their own journey. What advice would you give to anybody breaking into cybersecurity?
I feel like they obviously should not do it alone. Cybersecurity is not a one size fits all. And I think when people are trying to come in here, they don't know where to start. They don't know what skills. They think, oh, I've heard of this amazing boot camp or this amazing course, or this is going to set me up well. And I think, of course, I can only think about my career, but the differentiator is I always had a really great network and more than one mentor who I could always go and ask. Like right now, I'm in the middle of a layoff. I'm receiving some offers, and I'm talking to my mentors about what they mean for my career, what the different, roles mean for my career, what I should be, aware of, what I should be maybe asking. And it's not just because I don't know. Sometimes I just want to, trust but verify and make sure I'm on the right path. And I appreciate the different perspectives. And so I wish when I had gone into the military and into cyber that I'd had mentors that much sooner. But I did get them pretty soon and pretty quick and pretty fast. And I was really thankful. And I say mentors plural because most people think they only need one. And then the last thing I would say is
possible.
I say that, but don't just be like you need to have a few core ones. You have a very good relationship who definitely are invested and care about you. The other thing that I feel from a mentoring perspective that is so overlooked and it's so valuable is peer mentorship. If you're getting into cyber, you probably know some peers getting into cyber, and whether you're in the same boot camp class or like totally different ends, maybe one person's in the military, one person's in college, you guys that's a great area to be exchanging information and asking like, oh, do you know about resume writing, or what about recruiters, or where should we, whatever, and how should I do my LinkedIn? Like, go find the people that are either the same age or in the same, maybe they're not the same age because there are people coming to cyber from all ages, but they're the same as you. There is power in peer mentoring. I don't know why people don't look at that. So that was probably more than like one piece of advice, but I hope that will really help someone out there if you're looking into getting into cybersecurity, because if I haven't made it clear from a lot of the struggles we've talked on about that I have had in my career, I absolutely love it. And like, I don't care if I won $1 bajillion tomorrow. I'd have a nicer house, a nicer car, or a few cars, a few houses, but I'm going to be here. I'm staying. This is, y'all are stuck with me.
So as we all heard, Ryan is in it to win it, as am I. This is why I do this show. This is why I have the career I do. This is why I've been doing this shit for 15 plus years. I don't even know how long at this point. I can't even count. But at the end of the day, as she said, networking and mentoring is important. Be a mentor and be a mentee to everybody out there. If you can find someone that is on your level and you can speak the same language, talk to them, help them, guide them. It doesn't matter because you both know something different. So guess what? As you are their mentor, they can be yours at the same time. Do not allow age, race, sex, religion, whatever, take you away from somebody that can help guide you and help you out, and you can help them. If they don't want to take your advice, that's on them, not on you. But be there. Otherwise, look, this has been another amazing episode. I love the conversation. Me and Ryan could probably go rounds for another about 2 or 3 hours. I guarantee it, because we were both military and we just don't shut the fuck up. It just happens. But otherwise, I love you all. You've all been amazing. I will see you all next week with another amazing episode of Security Happy Hour. As always, I'm the Cyber Warrior, Ryan Rosado. This is Cyber Warrior Studios. I'll see you next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday. Take care and have a great one.